I desperately hope it has a chilling
In the
effect on
churches,
illegal
you think
immigrants
the
coming
U.S.
into our
Conference
country.
of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals from?
I think the U.S.
law enforcement?
Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
Now, let's just jump into this because I think what I've just witnessed were people who weren't hearing each other. And who do I blame? The media. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we are going to discuss the challenge issued forth by Vice President J.D. Vance, a self-proclaimed devout practicing Catholic, as well as the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, about this idea of capturing and deporting illegal criminal immigrants. This is going to be a challenging one, so please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. You have no idea, but it really does help us to overcome all the algorithms of YouTube that want to suppress a balanced Catholic pastoral response to the issues of the day. Everyone is talking about it, so why can't we as Catholics talk about it? And the only way we can do this is with your support. So please subscribe, like, share, and comment. And if you are able, please go to our patreon.com/thefatherleo show and become a member at any level. And if you support us financially with a small gift each month, you'll get access to great content and some special perks. So let's just jump right into it now in a discussion about faith and immigration with the man who just happens to be the Vice President of the United States, who is a Catholic. And he has to, in a sense, also listen to the bishops. As I said at the onset, this is going to be challenging because in a recent 60-minute interview, we hear how J.D. Vance kind of challenged the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops for this particular statement issued by Bishop Seitz, who just happens to be the Bishop of El Paso, Texas, and also the chairman of the Bishops' Committee on Migration. And this is the statement. I'm going to read it in full so that you know that I'm not trying to be persuasive one way or the other, but just present the facts and also to discuss a pastoral approach. Catholic healthcare, Catholic charities agencies, and the Church's other social service ministries work daily to feed, house, heal, educate, and meet people's needs in communities across the nation. Through these ministries, together with the Church's responsibility to proclaim the gospel and celebrate the sacraments, we uphold the belief that all people are conceived with inherent dignity, reflecting the image of God. Through our parishes, shelters, hospitals, schools, and other Catholic institutions, we recognize this dignity is not dependent on a person's citizenship or immigration status. Moreover, the charitable services we provide are fundamental to who we are as Christians. For the Church, charity is not a kind of welfare activity which could equally well be left to others, but is part of her nature, an indispensable expression of her being. And he's quoting Deus Caritas S number 25. Continuing, we recognize the need for just immigration enforcement and affirm the government's obligation to carry it out in a targeted, proportional, and humane way. However, non-emergency immigration enforcement in schools, places of worship, social service agencies, healthcare facilities, or other sensitive settings where people receive essential services would be contrary to the common good. With the mere rescission of the protected areas guidance, we are already witnessing reticence among immigrants to engage in daily life, including sending children to school and attending religious services. All people have a right to fulfill their duty to God without fear. Turning places of health, excuse me, turning places of care, healing, and solace into places of fear and uncertainty for those in need, while endangering the trust between pastors, providers, educators, and the people they serve, will not make our communities safer. Our organizations stand ready to work on a better path forward that protect the dignity of all those we serve, upholds the sacred duty of our providers, and ensures our borders and immigration system are governed with mercy and justice. Again, this was an official statement made by Bishop Mark Seitz, the Bishop of El Paso, Texas. He's the chairman of the Catholic Bishops' Committee on Migration, with a couple other members on that committee. Now, this is an important document because I think it does achieve a level of a balanced, commonsensical approach. However, on Face the Nation, we hear almost in a sense a flustered J.D. Vance with his pastors, namely the bishops of the United States of America. And I'm not sure where the misinterpretation of this document was translated, but I just want to at least play for you now this Face the Nation interview, and I want you to see where the contention comes from. And I don't think it comes from J.D. Vance, he's a good Catholic, his boss, which is President Trump, or the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I think this is all about media spin to try to pit these two great institutions, the government and the church, against each other. But you can decide. Just check out this interview.
Let me ask you about another area that you campaigned on quite a lot, and there was a flurry of activity on, and that has to do with immigration.
Sure.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk
support
about
them going into
people
schools
like Lake and Riley
churches.
who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe. Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murderer in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of course.
So what's the point of the question?
You changed the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Giving the authority to go into churches and go into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce the law everywhere to protect Americans.
Effect, a chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their kids to school.
I desperately hope it has a chilling effect on illegal immigrants coming into our country.
You think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals?
I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
Now, let's just jump into this, because I think what I've just witnessed were people who weren't hearing each other. And who do I blame? The media. So let's jump into a conversation to make sure that the culture of what the church stands for in protecting the dignity of human life, as well as what this good Catholic is trying to do in protecting these United States from criminal, illegal activity. Let's discuss this in our conversation regarding culture and immigration. There's a lot that was said here. First of all, I want to just say that when I heard this on this Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, I was immediately annoyed, and I'm just being honest, by the tone of the kind of questions that the interviewer asked. It's almost like she takes it all so personally. And I remember studying in journalism that good questions should not be personal. Now, you can feel passionate about it, and I'm sure that everyone is feeling passionate about this topic now. But it was almost as if she was just trying to create a division between the vice president and his bishops. And we're all supposed to be one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I also want to say, in a way, I'm glad that J.D. Vance was the one who was answering this question as opposed to Mr. Trump, because Mr. Trump, as good as he is in maybe answering questions, this was good because it was coming from a self-proclaimed devout practicing Catholic. But let's kind of analyze a few of the comments that were made in light of Bishop Seitz's comment, because he talks about he was heartbroken by the statement from Bishop Seitz. And I'm not quite sure why he would be heartbroken, because I think Bishop Seitz was very clear. He too wanted to make sure there were commonsensical laws, and gave the government, in a sense, that permission. It said very clearly, we recognize the need for just immigration enforcement and affirm the government's obligation to carry it out in a targeted, proportional, and humane way. But it seemed as if J.D. Vance didn't quite hear that because of the way the question was phrased by the reporter. Again, I see that media and culture, when you have Selena Gomez getting on her TikTok and crying because she wants to be able to do something to help, well, what she can do to help is actually give up her money. I mean, honestly, give up her money and pay for lawyers for all of the families who are in America, perhaps without documentation, and that way they can at least have some sort of legal representation. And if they are here for a reason of peace, then maybe we can follow former Mrs. Clinton, not the presidential candidate, but when she was a senator in New York, who actually claimed that if people are here illegally, then they must pay a stiffer amount of taxes because they are taking advantage of systems to benefit citizens, and they are not. Remember, that came from the senator, Hillary Rodham Clinton. So I think that everyone is kind of desiring the same objectives, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. But still reflecting on what J.D. Vance said, he mentioned something to the tune of $100 million to, as he would say, kind of reallocate illegal immigrants. I don't think that that's, I'm pretty sure that that's not what Catholic churches do. If there's any money that is received from the government, it is to provide charity for people. And again, I don't think Bishop Seitz was being unclear. He was talking about the kind of care and why, because we as Catholics have a responsibility to care for people no matter what their status is. It's called the corporal works of mercy. And it's all in recognition of the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. We as a church are everywhere, and we feel the freedom to be able to migrate to different parts in order to feel safe and prosperous. Jesus Christ himself was an immigrant when he was exiled by his mom, when he experienced an exile from his own town. But even as a baby, he went to Egypt for protection because Herod wanted to kill any child, any male child. So you can see that the Catholic Church has always had a preferential option to care for immigrants because we ourselves, even from our own Jewish tradition, have been considered this wandering Aramean, that we are, in a sense, people who do migrate. But I can tell you, as a priest who travels a lot and as an immigrant, I feel it's important to recognize the laws of the countries into which we are migrating or even visiting. I just got back from two separate countries, the Philippines and South Korea, and I had to wait in line a very long time in order to present my proper documentation. And can I tell you, even in the Philippines and definitely in South Korea, you felt the pressure of being able to present yourself before you could cross a line and enter into that country. I'm not quite sure I understand where the breakdown is. That compassion also requires common sense in order to protect the country's citizens and to make sure that people coming into the country are doing so for not only the right reasons, but in a reasonable way. That is language that I hope will be shared between these two institutions. A couple other observations that I want to make is that he considered the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops as not as what he would call strong partners in this regard. And again, I don't know where he's coming from because we are strong partners with government that wants to uphold laws. I think that there's a lot of unnecessary confusion with regards to emotion because we are forgetting one of the best principles in the Catholic Church is that we believe in a principle not either or, but both and. This is so key to understanding where the Catholic Church's position is in regards to immigration, and also what the U.S. government needs to understand if they want a good partner with the Catholic Church. We both, the U.S. government and the Catholic Church, needs to make better logistical vocabulary and syntax distinctions to encompass this principle of both and. We want both to protect the dignity of human life at all stages and in all places, no matter what their legal status is, and uphold the laws of the land and also to protect the citizens in which these undocumented people now consider domicile. Because in the past 4 years, in the prior administration, we saw a flurry of activity that was dangerous to American citizens that were caused by illegal immigrants. And it's because culture, because of a desire to wreak havoc in America, we have to admit that 20 million people crossing the southern border, that is unsustainable and it's dangerous. And it was really the fault of sanctuary cities. And there again is a problem word for me. And it should be a problem word for Catholics. Catholics should really revolt against the use of the term sanctuary cities. Because that word sanctuarium is what we use to describe the altar area where the Eucharist is confected. And now it's being used as a politicized term, generally for places where illegal immigration has gone amok and has destroyed the cities. They are no longer clean. They are no longer safe for anyone. If anything, the Catholic churches should really stand up against those mayors and those governors who are creating sanctuary cities, because those sanctuary cities are destroying the dignity of human cohesive life, like a cohesive living, a safety for the people there. So I have a real struggle with that. And so I think also, strangely and sadly, the emotions are so high because we are seeing a lot of misinformation on the news already. And so I'm going to tell you what I think needs to be done in my commentary, but let me just give you an example about how there is what I would call a coordinated attack to use celebrities like Selena Gomez crying on her TikTok channel. I mean, trust me, I don't even follow her, but she's showing up constantly in my feed because they want to push how even celebrities are just disgusted by the way this current administration is approaching illegal immigration and calling basically Trump a fascist. And let's remember, this was lodged against Mr. Trump in his prior administration in 2016, where they accused him of locking up children in jails. And you got to remember that that was President Obama who created those holding cells. And the images that were used were during President Obama's term, not during Trump's term. And when AOC is standing out there crying, but she's so well dressed, we all know it was a photo op because she wasn't crying during Obama's term. Now, granted, she wasn't a junior senator at the time, but I don't see her outraged at when communities are being overrun by Tren de Aragua gangs from Venezuela and drug cartels who are trafficking children. It's just a fact, and that's not showing up on the news. And we also have to remember that it was Mr. Obama's time in office where he was known as the deporter-in-chief, where he deported over 2 million people back to their home countries. So there's a real... I'm saying this not to be political, but to help us as Catholics become better at critically thinking through the news. Those 2 minutes that I played for the Face the Nation was a perfect example of how the interviewer was taking things personally and trying to create a wedge between a good practicing Catholic, J.D. Vance, and the Catholic bishops by the way she was asking the questions. Now, I'm saying all of this because there's another point that we have to make. And that is being able to speak truth to power. Because let's admit, Mr. Trump and J.D. Vance, with the majority in the House, in the Senate, and with a majority of more conservative judges on the Supreme Court, have now, in a sense, all 3 branches. That is a lot of power. And there are going to be people like Bishop Buddy, the Episcopalian Right Reverend Bishop of Washington, D.C., for the Episcopalians, who, in her address at the recent prayer service after the inauguration, she claims that she was just simply speaking truth to power and wanting to challenge the incoming administration to make sure they're compassionate. There's got to be a distinction in this whole political realm. I think a lot of people are using compassion without common sense. Why do I know that? Because the Catholic Church has common sense when it comes to compassion. Let me give you a few examples. In the Catholic Church, no Catholic church can hire illegal immigrants. We can't. We also do why? Because we do a ton of background checks for everyone. Does that mean that it's completely clear that no one without kind of any nefarious desires can't slip through the cracks? No, we know that because there have been some teachers and some employees who have had a background and they were able to make it through our very strict hiring policies. Like, again, even though I don't work in the archdiocese, even though I don't work for an archdiocese or a diocese, I have to provide papers that say that I have no background before I can even go and preach in a diocese. There are strong laws, and there are even some strong language. For example, we can't, we talk about how certain activities are disordered, namely sexual activity. We call it disordered. We ban people from receiving communion. We actually have laws that say you are barred from receiving the sacrament of priesthood because there are laws. I mean, even going to the Vatican, We know that there are big walls there, and you can't even go into those holy doors unless you actually go through security. So the Catholic Church has common sense when it comes to these things. But what's being misinterpreted is the politics and the pressure that we receive from media and the popular opinion. Emotion is running high. And where do I get this? Well, let me just give you an example with something that we all heard about, how ICE came in to do a sweep in a school. That was reported for almost 24 to 48 hours. And later, we hear that that was not true. Just check this out.
Chicago Public Schools CEO Pedro Martinez defends the district's response to a false report of ICE agents at a school with over 90% Latino students, while an alderperson blames CPS for spreading unnecessary panic. As the American flag blows in the wind, the weekend brings some well-needed quietness to Hamline Elementary. Yesterday was anything but when panic spread quickly after a false report of Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, ICE, showing up at the back of the Yards Elementary School.
It was an unfortunate misunderstanding, but actually a really good lesson for us.
Today, Chicago Public Schools CEO Pedro Martinez defended the incident by saying the school followed all the protocols as if the agents were ICE. The principal did not let them in. But it was Secret Service agents that came to Hamline unannounced. The agency claims the agents identified themselves and left business cards. They were looking for a student who made a threat to a government official.
Regardless, we are not going to allow a federal agent to come in, whether it's immigration or another agency, without the legal jurisdiction, without making sure they have a warrant.
The confusion produced chaos at Hamline. The media descended on the school as CPS officials held a news conference followed by the Chicago Teachers Union. Immigration groups arrived and parents panicked as some took their kids out of school.
We saw loads of people that we didn't know. We saw a few protesters at this school. And so where was the protection? What did CPS safety and security do? In my opinion, nothing.
Hamline sits in Alderman Jeanette Taylor's 20th Ward. She says Martinez must take accountability for the situation.
So you were quick to put out something without doing a real investigation causes more harm to the community than help.
The community is on edge since President Trump announced ICE agents will come to schools. Taylor says Martinez should have called the mayor's office before responding to the school. Moving forward, Taylor is calling on the Johnson administration and CPS to have a coordinated plan when ICE does show up. In a statement posted on social media, Mayor Brandon Johnson said it's imperative that individuals not spread unverified information that sparks fear across the city.
It was wrong. You know, when the government has the power to protect its citizens everywhere, that's just the case in churches as well as in schools. I honestly don't think that there's going to be, I'm probably 95% confident that there's not going to be a raid during Mass. The only people who's interrupted Mass were protesters who are LGBTQ people, BLM people, as well as the Stop Oil climate cultist people. Those are the only people who have actually interrupted Mass. I've seen law enforcement protect churches from those things. And honestly, we don't check passports in churches. But I can say this, in light of all the crazy things that we've experienced, from generally people who are anti-institutional, whether it be anti-government or anti-church, churches probably need to put up security around the perimeter. Not for the people to go in, not for the people who were in there, but for people who want to go into the church and wreak havoc. That's why we have alarm systems. So you see how sadly, this conversation is going to go nowhere quick unless we actually outline the objectives, which is what I want to do now in my commentary. We have to have a set of objectives. And I want and I pray to God that the USCCB will create a delegate of people who will make an appointment with Mr. Vance and, if necessary, Mr. Trump. And of course, let this be trickled down to Mr. Holman, who's in charge of the immigration services now. I don't think that any of these people, Mr. Trump, Mr. Vance, or Mr. Holman, are bad people. I think that they have at their interest a desire to protect the American communities and the people living in the United States of America. Now, sadly, people are always going to make it all about, the working families who are doing the menial tasks, so to speak. And unfortunately, they are sometimes being taken advantage of. And that's the real sad thing. This is something we've got to consider, because if we don't consider this, then we're not going to have good conversation and a good partnership between the government and the Catholic Church. This has got to be considered. Check this out.
And then there's one other element I want to remind, because this is painful stuff that people don't want to talk about in Washington. She interviewed a lot of these children who related to what happened to them on their journey when they're in the custody of the cartels. Yes, they were sexually assaulted. Yes, they were forced into labor that isn't appropriate for children under the age of 18. Yes, they're told that they have to pay off their debts when they get here, and they don't know what that means. Does that mean having sex? Does that mean doing some form of indentured servitude until they pay off their debts? It's the most inhumane way that any child could ever enter the country, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris created that pathway.
Ms. Marcos, you testified a moment ago to Senator Butler that every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes? They are operating heavy machinery. They are delivering meals. They are harvesting coffee. They are working construction. They are working as housekeepers. They are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid. They are not going to school. They are not cared for. They are not getting meals. Almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
You see, this is what we're dealing with here. I know that the Catholic Church and the government stand against this kind of illegal activity that happens because people are being made vulnerable by poor previous administrations' lack of attention with regards to immigration. So I want to make sure that we're not blaming this current administration for the activity they're trying to do in order to rectify the previous administration's terrible policies. And it is surprising that we did not see this kind of statement from the bishop's immigration committee in the previous administration. Because I think, again, the optics, the language, we always want to promote the fact that as Catholics, we are a church and a community of compassion. But just as a human, I always have to ask myself, how do I feel about stuff like this?
Mr. Trump, we want to say thank you to you for deportation me to Mexico and give me 1 week's vacation. My boss never give me. Thank you for deportation me back to my country. 1 week I be back in US. Okay. 1 week I be back. My buddies over here, they give me my buddies from the CARTEL. They give me these. Look, I be back 1 week. Look. My buddies give me this passport. So you tell my boss 1 week vacation, okay? I be back.
So you see, it is not only the job of the government, but it requires the cooperation of the church to protect people from those who want to enter into this country, not only with illegal activity, but to also do illegal and dangerous things. And so my commentary is simply this. We need to have some core objectives. And I think Bishop Seitz outlined them. I'm going to do my job as a priest who's talking with you, trying to provide pastoral, common sense, compassionate perspective, a pastoral perspective, because again, the media is going to want to warp your mind. The entertainment industry is going to want to tap into your emotions, and the two institutions that can help solve this problem, namely this administration's governmental powers and the Catholic Church's compassion. If these two can stay together in good conversation, we can actually make a difference. But don't let the media and the entertainment industry and the lies of wokeism try to tear us apart so that we can obtain these objectives. It's very simply protect the dignity of human life at all stages and in all places. That's got to be key. Help the government understand that we as a church exist, and we will continue to do the corporal works of mercy no matter what anyone's immigration or citizenship status is. We have to be able to speak truth to power, including, let's speak truth to power to the media and make sure that they are using the proper terms. Illegal immigration. Make sure that we are bringing up the truth to those powerful industries that want to just simply sway by emotions. And then finally, let's work objectively to make the United States a strong, united States. United, not divided, which is what I think sanctuary cities have done. They tried to divide the United States of America. And if you just go to these sanctuary cities, they are terrible places to live. Truly, they're harboring so much illegal activity, mafia-styled governance, truly. And so we need to make sure that the Catholic Church is helping to strengthen the United States of America, because the stronger the United States is, the more generous we can be to help immigrants, to help other countries. Those are at least what I think the objectives should be. I hope that this makes sense. I know that this is a difficult conversation, but if you stuck with me here, then thank you for that, because I don't think we have a lot of good pastoral conversations regarding this topic. And this isn't coming from somebody who a lot of people claim is a conservative or a Trumper. I certainly wasn't a supporter of Biden and Harris's policies. I'm more in favor of what I'm hearing from J.D. Vance. As long as that message gets spread far and wide to all the Catholic churches, that we're not going to be running in your churches during the service, unless, of course, there's dangerous activity and we can protect people there. So I just think that we have to have this conversation, which can hopefully lead to a conversion. A conversion that, yes, the president and J.D. Vance, his vice president, they need to have. But you also know who needs to have ongoing conversion? The Catholic bishops of the United States of America. And guess who else? Me. And guess who else? You. Conversations can lead to a conversion, a more united stance, a united states, and united front to protect the dignity of human life in all stages and in all places, and no matter their status. Thank you for watching. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment, and please support us on our Patreon community so that we can continue to provide you the content that will help dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you. Stay hungry for Him, for God.